Welcome to Engedrian. If this is your first time listening, or even if you are returning, be sure to follow us on Facebook, X, formerly Twitter, Instagram, TikTok, and YouTube for additional content, battle maps, and background details. We hope you are enjoying our adventure. Let's see what happens next. Peace spends much of their time exploring libraries, bookstores, thrift stores, estate stores, and any other shop that might have books for them to review. They select only 2 books which they conveniently found on the second day of the first quinday, which they added to their book of books. One is entitled Physiologies of Magical Creatures, and the other Essays on the Spirits of the Tomb, a Natural Philosophy. They spend a few hours each afternoon reading the books and studying them in detail. Peace has gained advantage on Arcana, History, Insight, Investigation, Medicine, Nature, Perception, Religion, and Survival checks that deal with magical creatures or undead of any type. Peace picks a few street corners to read their recitations of poetry, prose, and some observations they have made, as well as a few cafes on the days that the weather turns nasty cold. Peace makes 2 performance checks, rolls 23 and 11. During the first week, the weather is more pleasant and many people stop to listen and pay tribute. The second week, however, is so much colder with crowded cafes that few people are paying attention and they seem to just want to stay warm. Peace receives 52 gold pieces, 29 silver pieces, and 330 copper pieces. Outside of these solitary activities, Peace spends the bulk of their time with Case. Peace is unsure exactly how they feel about Case and vice versa, but they enjoy each other's company immensely and often sleep in the same bed at the tavern or the manor house curled up in a large ball of feline fur. After Case's second fight in the caged matches, which was brutal, Peace fell asleep in the large fluffy chair reading about vampires while Case slept soundly in his bed. But when Peace awoke, they were back in the bed with Case in the usual ball. As the second quinday draws close to the end, Fodinas has everyone meet at the manor house in the afternoon as he wants to show them a few upgrades to the manor house. Everyone is already overjoyed with their own space, plenty of secure storage, gardens full of fruits and vegetables, and a wonderful cook named Joyanne and a housekeeper named Philippe. When they arrive, they are greeted by an unusual sight. Fodinas sits on top of a grand caravan carriage, which looks like it could easily hold 20 people, and is drawn by 7 beautiful draft horses with hardy leather tack and gleaming metal bits. In the large paddock next to the barn, 6 large war horses of great stature and height are running and prancing in the grass. Next to Fodinas is a young human boy, and in the paddock with the war horses is a slightly older human woman.
This is Gelder, and that is his mother, Sina. They are the caretakers for our carriage, horses, and those lovely war horses. In the barn, you'll find the finest saddles, harnesses, and saddlebags money can buy. I did so well on Case's match. I wanted to get us all something that could be useful. I've already paid Gelder and Sina for the Isverana, and the barn is stocked with food for the horses. And, last but not least, waiting for us when we need it in South Canville is the Satmayakin, our warship, and a crew of 10, paid in full for the Isverana.
Fodinas smiles at everyone proudly. The blank stares on their faces is all he expected, but then Malaysia breaks into a fit of gesticulating and hollering. Everyone else suddenly stops staring and laughs. The party has a large meal together at the manor house and settles in for an evening of long rest. The following morning, the carriage is loaded, led by Sina and Gelder, to take them to the launch point for their return to the Blight. At the launch point, they see the lonely lady waiting for them with Captain Fishdwain waving as they arrive. The other 6 ships are also docked, and Malaysia is suddenly very excited to hear what happened with Inacel's mountain cave opening. As they exit the carriage, Malaysia rushes over to a group of airship sailors near the other 6 ships and begins asking questions. The rest of the party sees him very excited and talking with multiple sailors for quite a while. By the time they are all unloaded from the carriage and their supplies are being loaded onto the lonely lady, Malaysia returns with eyes wide and mouth open, his hair flaming brightly.
Inacel, your cave was exactly what you thought. The airships bombarded it and destroyed it. They also chased down a force of about 50 creatures and ran them back to the sea. Then, they sank their ships.
Malaysia smiles excitedly and pats her on the back. Inacel seems less excited and sad. Theophania puts her hand on Inacel's shoulder and squeezes it tightly.
I am glad they are successful, but I cannot celebrate so many deaths. It is just not in my nature. But Bathilia is safe.
She sighs and begins climbing the ladder into the lonely lady. The party follows with Malaysia beginning the climb last. When they are all aboard, Captain Fishtwain walks over to greet them and bows, pointing behind him. Kalia appears from out of the captain's cabin and smiles at everyone.
And here we are again, my friends. I wanted to see you off and provide you with one more little gift, which I had to have made special.
He hands Umgurn a black velvet box. Umgurns open it and sees 8 silver stud earrings, 7 with emeralds and 1 with a diamond.
Umgurn, the diamond is for you, and also take an emerald. The emeralds will allow all of you to communicate with each other directly, regardless of how far apart you are. You simply tap the earring and speak, and the others wearing it will hear it. The diamond, Umgurn, connects you directly to me. As you have learned, I can appear wherever I may be needed, well, given the limitations of magic. I only entrust these to the most important people in my kingdom.
Kalia bows to Umgurn and the rest of the party, turns away and walks to the stern, then vanishes. Umgurn turns to the party and indicates for each of them to take an emerald. He takes the emerald and the diamond.
I am able to safely pierce your ears if that is what you desire.
Inesel moves close to Umgurn and places a hand on his shoulder.
Yes, that is probably for the best.
Inesel removes her healer's kit, which includes a thin steel needle. Malage produces a flame in his hand, and Inesel passes the needle through it until it is red hot. She allows it to cool to black and then carefully pricks one of Umgurn's ears. When she removes it, he places the diamond stud in his ear. She repeats the process for everyone, and Theophania assists Inesel with hers. The party all receive 1 hit point of damage. Umgurn receives 2. The party has received a matched set of earrings of sending. Umgurn receives an earring of sending with Kalia. The lonely lady launches into the sky and begins moving back towards the Blight. Unlike the first trip, where they join the rest of the fleet until the mountain, the ship heads in a more straight path towards Hespa, the most northern ruin on the map, secluded by the mountains west of the Blight from the Fingers. During the several days' journey, the lonely lady passes near Inik Kolther.
What is that place?
Malage stares at the tall, thin pillars and parapets of the large city. It is a place of great magical teaching and thinking, unlike the towers that captured you, little one, which are entirely wizards, many of whom are not such good people. Inik Kolther is a place of all magical scholars and beings. Although not to the same scale, it is much like Cantheria to the far north for the religions of Angedrian. People travel from all over to study here and learn. The only rivals to Inik are Edistrand in the Besparian Sea and Galantarian on the mainland of Anbeth. If you ever wish to study with the most prestigious spellcasters in Pathilia, you should journey there, little Genasi. Captain Fishtwain slaps him hard on the back, smiles, and returns to steering. Malage stares in wonder as the city drifts out of sight. Following the map as best they can, the crew pilots the ship towards where Hespa is supposed to be and makes a sighting of what looks to be ruins at the end of the 4th day of flying. Isvara is setting behind the mountains west of the Blight, but the last rays of light illuminate the plain below. Unlike Phila, which was mostly desert and desert palms with water flowing through it, Hespa is bizarrely different. The land is completely flat and surrounded with low desert dunes. 4 large ancient stone towers on the 4 corners of the ruin are the only buildings visible. The ruins extend into the desert, but towards the middle, large oak trees are growing on fields of grass. The grass grows denser, and the trees become mostly willows. In the very center of the ruins is an enormous tree, growing so high, thin clouds surround the top. The entire party moves to the same side of the ship to get a better look.
Well, this is not what I expected. I mean, right away, clearly, there is growth.
Umgurn puts his hands on the railing and surveys the surroundings. Captain Fishtwain walks over and hands out several spyglasses. Fodinus, Case, and Theophania take them. Fodinus, Case, and Theophania make perception checks. Roll 10, 17, and 15. Fodinus can't see much beyond the trees. Theophania and Case both gasp and look up from their spyglasses.
There are definitely creatures down there. Some large bird-like things, some darker hairy ones, lots of life.
Case nods in agreement with Theophania's description.
That being the situation, it's best to be prepared. Assume we may be dealing with lots of wild animals in a cell. Hopefully we won't have to fight with any of them.
Umgurn turns away from the railing and moves down below. The rest of the party converse for a few moments and then separate to prepare themselves for the landing the next morning. The lonely lady makes a full circle around the ruins of Hespa before the captain selects a landing point on the northwest corner. The shadow of the large ancient stone tower in this corner looms over the ship as it moves to the ground and deploys the ladder. The party quickly climbs down to the ground as Philby and Seraphine lower a cart loaded with supplies via 4 ropes. As the cart lands and Fodinas and Case unhook the ropes, Theophania steps into the harness and straps it across her girdle. She nods to the party, and they look around as the ship lifts into the air and takes up a stationary spot on top of the stone tower. The party makes investigation and perception checks. Roll 5, 18, 8, 2, 18, 2, 12, and roll 20, 13, 6, 15, 3, 15, and 5. The strange environment, which includes sand adjacent to fresh growing grass and dead ancient trees next to tall growing oaks, all with crisscrossing ancient worn down stones sticking up here and there, is very distracting for most of the party. Theophania, her ranger skills at play, and Fodinas, used to the shadows, detect the logic of the ancient structures and can distinguish the foundations and walls of missing buildings from the passageways between them. They spend a few minutes with Inicel, who has a fresh parchment with Case to map the ruins, explaining what they think they are seeing and how to proceed. Case, Inicel, and Peace, their unique senses heightened in this bizarre landscape, hear the distinctive sounds of movement out of sight, and Case can smell a dense, wet, gamey odor wafting through the trees.
How should we proceed?
Umgern steps next to the 4 of them, beginning a sketch on the parchment.
Carefully.
Case whispers, puts a finger to his lips, and points to the trees. Umgren nods and puts his hands together, indicating small, and then makes a walking motion with one hand over the other. The rest of the party nods. Their familiars emerge from their pocket dimensions and begin fanning out into the bushes. Inicel hands the map to Case, and she morphs into an axe-beak and follows the familiars into the trees. The party begins receiving telepathic information from their familiars, which they relate to Case. He sketches the information accurately, and the party begins moving east, staying on the northern edge of the ruins. The birds, Vizal, Thought, and Vesper, soar above the trees and swoop through the branches, occasionally pausing to stop and observe. The ground creatures move to the limit of range, survey and report, and then move on. After an hour of scouting and mapping, Umgren taps his emerald earring and whispers to the group to reconvene on him. Within a few minutes, everyone is standing close, and Inicel is back to her lizardfolk form. Case lays the map on the ground, and everyone stoops down to look at the note.
There is very little here on the surface. I believe we need to complete our survey going east, take a break, and move back west. But this is so very different from Thilla. The only structures that are intact seem to be the towers.
Umgern looks around curiously at everyone.
Perhaps Hespa was primarily a town of wooden buildings. There are a lot of trees here now. Maybe this was a forest long ago, and Hespa was built from that resource.
Inicel picks up a shiny stone, looks at it for a moment, and then puts it in her pocket.
The area is mostly flat, no mountains or hills. That would mean the stuff that come from underground, unless they flattened a small mountain for this much stone.
Malayge points at the large tower and the huge stone foundations.
A mine?
Fodinas draws a square in the sand with his dagger and then a circle in the middle.
Yes, a mine. But where? Let's continue and perhaps we'll find it.
Umgern stands, but Malayge tugs at his tunic.
A mine might be the source of the stone, and the buildings might have been made from wood, as the trees would indicate. But what has made that tree grow so huge?
Malayge points at the towering tree ever present in the ruin with clouds near its top.
Magic? Druids? Or something else?
Inicel pats Malayge on the back and nods. The party recalls their familiars and resumes trekking across the ruins and the forests towards the east. Inicel retains her lizardfolk form and sends Sister with the other familiars to explore. The party make stealth checks. Roll 22, 25, 14, 17, 19, 22, and 13. Though there is bramble, brush, dense grass, and old stones, the party and their familiars manage to continue in an easterly direction without running into any trouble or disturbing the wildlife. While exploring, they note that there are monkeys, baboons, orangutans, gorillas, apes, and giant apes spread throughout the forests and clinging to trees. The animals, though typically very territorial, do not seem interested in the party. Very large birds, including ostrich, emus, axebeaks, rocks, phoenix, giant owls, and giant eagles, are flying or running throughout. Similar to the primates, the birds are largely ignoring or do not notice the party. Snakes, lizards, turtles, and other reptiles slither and slide through the underbrush while lions, tigers, cheetahs, and civets creep through the long grasses. Despite the abundant wildlife, the party and their familiar move through the forest unabated and finish the 3 hours of mapping to end up at the eastern edge of the ruins. Though they are able to mark the foundations of the stone and the various trees and wildlife, there is no evidence of a mine to be found in what they've surveyed so far. The party takes a short rest, has a meal, and discusses the ruins and the mapping so far. Case shows the map to the group. The party takes a short rest. Each party member eats a ration. Case makes a cartography check, rolls 14.
Based on the views from the ship and what we have covered this morning, I would estimate it will take us another 2 days to finish surveying everything. And we should make it to the giant tree this afternoon.
Case points to the sketch so far and out to the trees around them. The party looks at the map and the trees as well. Malaysia stands up and walks a few feet towards the giant tree in the distance.
The mine. It's under the tree. It has to be.
Malaysia folds his arm and stares.
Why would you think that, Malaysia?
Theophania stands next to him.
It only makes sense. Something is influencing the growth of that tree, and it spreads from the tree to the rest of the ruins.
You might be right, little one.
Fodinus stands on the other side of Malaysia.
We'll find out when we get there.
Malaysia smiles at Fodinus and grabs his hand, giving it a tight squeeze. The party and their familiars continue scouting back towards the west, and after about an hour come within visual distance of the tree. But the tree doesn't seem to do the towering vegetation justice. The base of it is at least 25 arm spans in diameter. Rather than the tree meeting the ground, it grows 2 or 3 arm spans off the ground, with its roots forming pillars down into the soil, which creates a dark space underneath. The roots themselves range from 2 to 5 arm spans in thickness. Stones and rocks lay all about the outside of the tree where the foundation was disrupted by its growth. Scanning the tree as far as the party can see, its branches alternate in groups of 3 to 5 emerging on the same level, with the lowest branches being 2 to 3 arm spans thick and growing 10 to 15 arm spans from the trunk of the tree. The closest branch to the ground is still 10 arm spans up from the forest floor. Where the branches spread over the land, it is cool, crisp, and dark. Rocks are covered in iridescent moss, and mushrooms of a dozen varieties grow everywhere.
Wow.
Theophania's slow exultation is reflected by the rest of the party's sighs, nods, and guffaws. Malaysia makes an arcana check, rolls 13.
This is definitely magic, but I don't know what kind. When we were flying over the mountains, we could see the ruins from a great distance, but if I'm remembering correctly, we didn't see this tree until we were very close, no?
He looks to the group, who all nod casually. The 3 bird familiars fly up and into the trees as far as they can, then swoop back down. Slipknot crawls up one of the tree roots, and Sister vanishes down into the ground around the same root. Filigree and Hestia walk towards the dark base of the tree within the roots. After a few minutes, all of them return.
There is an old structure under the base of the tree, according to Hestia.
Case points towards the darkness. Theophania nods as Filigree slithers up to her side and onto her shoulder.
The rest of the forest, Vizal doesn't detect anything living on or around the branches of this tree.
Peace and Malaysia also nod in agreement as Thought and Vesper land on their shoulders. Inesel makes an Arcana check and a Nature check, rolls 6 and 16. Inesel is very quiet for a long time. Then she stoops down and Sister crawls into her hand.
Sister and I cannot speak to the magic of this tree, Malaysia, but we can tell you that it is unnatural.
Her face seems to darken, and she strokes the soft bristles of Sister's back slowly.
Do we explore this structure under the tree now, or finish the survey and come back later?
Umgren stares under the tree with his arms folded. Vizal, on his shoulder, rubs its beak lovingly against his head, making soft cawing sounds. The party casts a vote for tree or survey, 1d20, 1 to 10 or 11 to 20. Roll 4, 10, 2, 4, 7, 12, and 18. Theophania and Peace seem distressed by the thought of probing under the dark tree and would prefer to finish the survey and come back to the tree at a later time, but the rest of the party wants to explore the tree now. The party makes persuasion checks versus Theophania and Peace's insight checks. Roll 29 versus 26. Umgren and Malaysia offer a series of thoughts on exploring the tree now, supported by comments from Inesel. Ultimately, Peace and Theophania reluctantly agree to move forward with the base of the tree. The party moves forward with their ground familiars ahead of them by at least 10 arm spans. The birds remain on their master's shoulders. As the party approaches the structure, the roots become a bit denser. The party make dexterity saving throws. Roll 13, 5, 9, 5, 2, 7, 22, and 26. The density of the roots creates pockets of treachery that engulf the party's feet constantly, making the terrain extremely difficult and slow-going for almost everyone. Theophania, having 4 legs to move and balance on, keeps herself above the root bases and has less trouble. Peace, on the other hand, seems to bounce and glide from root to root with no problem. Both of them pause frequently to extract one or more colleagues from the roots. Fodinus, Enicel, Case, Malaysia, and Umgurn suffer 1 level of exhaustion. After more than 15 arm spans of very challenging roots, the party arrives at the structure the familiars had seen, which appears to have been one of the stone towers like the one on the outskirts, but much more massive, perhaps 3 times as tall. Fragments of the tower, including parapets and walls, hang from the undergrowth of the tree, and parts are even carried up into the tree trunk with only corners and edges exposed. The base of the tower, though destroyed, is quite large. Malaysia makes an intelligence check. Disadvantage, exhaustion. Rolls 12. Malaysia points to several ancient pieces of metal and stone scattered around.
These are stone cutting and shaping tools. This would have been the primary site of mining. I knew it.
The party laughs loudly, and Fodinus pats Malaysia on the back.
The familiars are at the mine entrance, just over there.
Umgurn points, and everyone moves to the edge of a large, dark hole going down. There is no ladder or rope, but the roots of the tree make serpiginous loops through the space, creating a makeshift network of hands and footholds. Theophania detaches her cart and secures it to one of the roots. Others grab items from the cart to assist with descending and climbing. After a few minutes of studying the thick cords, ropes, and strands of the tree, Case begins the descent down first. The party make athletics or acrobatics checks. Roll 22, 23, 25, 9, 10, 23, and 15. The roots prove to be easy foot and hand holds, allowing the party to quickly scale down the 10 arm spans to the solid floor of the cavern below. Malaysia has trouble gripping the roots and slips a few times, falling the last 3 arm spans to land on his back, out of breath. Malaysia takes 2 falling damage. Fodinus and Case help him to his feet and make sure he's okay, but mostly his ego is bruised. Umgurn smiles down at the little genasi and waves, then suddenly loses his grip and falls 2 arm spans to a large root trunk, slams into it, and then falls slowly the last 2 arm spans to the cave floor. Umgurn takes 9 falling, bludgeoning damage.
Ouch.
Malaysia laughs as he helps Umgurn to his feet. The rest of the party scramble down easily and all regroup beneath the large opening where a fraction of the last afternoon light illuminates the space.
Enicel and Theophania, prepare some torches so you can see. The rest of us can use our dark vision to move forward. Send your familiars ahead.
Umgurn begins surveying the perimeters of the cave they have landed in, with Vizal still on his shoulders. Enicel laughs, pulls her crystal scimitar from its scabbard, and fills the area with soft blue light. Umgurn nods with a smile. Slipknot, Filigree, Hestia, and Sister scurry off in different directions and report back telepathically. After 5 minutes, Enicel speaks up.
This level is pretty empty. Looks like an intermediate area. There are ladders and a hole this way.
She moves south into the darkness, her crystal scimitar illuminating the way. The party follows with Theophania in the rear, using a torch to illuminate her way. At the hole, the party peers over and sees a 5 arm span descent to what looks like a wooden platform below. There is a ladder made of wood, twine, and nails that appears to be beyond ancient. Enicel looks back at the party.
This ladder does not seem like something sufficient to support our weight. It has aged well beyond Umgurn.
The party bursts out laughing, and even Umgurn chuckles. Ropes are pulled from bags and secured to the cave floor with pitons and hammers. One by one, they climb down the rope to the ancient wooden platform. Enicel makes a perception check. Rolls 13. When her lizard feet land on the plank below, Enicel quickly grasps the rope and calls up to the others above her.
This plank does not feel secure. Just keep using the rope to descend.
She moves past the plank and into the darkness below. After 10 arm spans at the end of her rope, she can see the ground of the next level in the flare of her scimitar. She drops the last 10 feet to the floor and calls up to the group.
It's about 12 arm spans down. At the end of your rope, swing towards my light and let go. You'll be fine.
She laughs a bit and then begins exploring the space ahead of her. In less than a few minutes, everyone has joined and stands together, looking into the strange room. The party makes perception and investigation checks. Rolls 6, 7, 3, 3, 18, 7, 12, and 2, and rolls 4, 8, 12, 20, 10, and 17. Umgern uses divine sense. The darkness of the room, despite the glowing crystal scimitar and Theophania's bullseye lantern, along with the rest of the party's dark vision, is very dense and still. Few details can be determined from the clutter of ancient broken beds and dilapidated piles of possibly old wooden cabinets. Umgren, however, pauses and shushes the group as his senses reach out beyond what he knows is true to what could be true. He smells a distinct odor of death and decay that shouldn't be possible in this ancient bunkhouse. The glint of steel and white bone catch his eye. He throws his hands up and out quietly, catching the attention of the party and nodding slowly. He points to the far side of the room and shakes his head. The party makes stealth checks. Rolls 17, 20, 7, 16, 8, 19, and 25. The party freezes and looks intently into the dark. Case, placing a foot down at Umgren's call for the quiet stop, finds a loose stone which causes him to slip and make a jangle of noise. Umgren, trying to silence him, bumps into Case and intensifies the noise. They both grab each other's shoulders and nod as the silence returns. Umgren smiles, but then frowns as slow, guttural groans rise from the darkness ahead. Everyone rolls for initiative. Peace attacks Skeleton C with spear, moves to Skeleton C, free of blows using key. Rolls 25 versus armor class 13 for a hit for 6 piercing damage. Rolls 7 for a miss and 21 for a hit for 8 bludgeoning damage. Peace, aware of the skeletons that Umgren detected, hurls their spear into the chest of a skeleton on the right, then charges it with 2 claw punches, shattering its skull and spine and dropping it to the ground. Case attacks Skeleton B with spear. Bonus action throws longsword into the air to attack Skeleton B, moves to Skeleton A. Rolls 20 versus AC 13 for 11 piercing damage. Rolls 25 versus AC 13 for 11 slashing damage. Following Peace's lead, Case throws his spear at the middle skeleton emerging from the broken bed frame, striking it in the chest. He tosses his longsword into the air and it slashes down on the same skeleton, smashing it to dust. He charges a third skeleton to the left, clawing its way from the bed. Skeleton A attacks Case with short sword. Rolls 6 for a miss. As Case charges it, the third skeleton swings its short sword at the oncoming man-lion, but chunks the rusty blade into the bed frame. Umgren moves into melee with Skeleton A, makes 2 scimitar attacks, rolls 20 versus AC 13 for 7 slashing damage, and 16 versus AC 13 for 4 slashing damage. Umgren, seeing the last obvious threat skeleton swipe at Case, charges the undead and makes 2 scimitar slashes, shattering the creature's ribcage and smashing an arm. Skeleton D attacks Umgren with short sword, rolls 8 for a miss. From out of the darkness of the cave, another skeleton rushes towards Umgren with a rusty short sword and swings mercilessly, but buries the blade in the dirt. Malaysia moves 15 feet to the left, casts Firebolt at Skeleton A. Rolls 24 versus AC 13 for 1 fire damage. Malay shifts to his left to bring the attacking skeleton into view and throws a firebolt at the undead, glancing off his shoulder and illuminating the room behind. 2 more skeletons are climbing from the darkness. Theophania moves 30 feet to the far side of the room, attacks Skeleton E with a longbow. Rolls 14 versus AC 13 for 6 piercing damage. Theophania sees the additional skeletons climbing from the destroyed beds and rushes towards them. She launches an arrow at the closest one and catches it in the chest plate, shattering its right arm and shoulder. Odinus moves 30 feet to the left, then 20 feet, dash bonus action, back to the right. Attacks Skeleton F with short sword, assassinate, surprise, sneak. Rolls 21 for a hit, doing 44 piercing damage. Odinus sees the last skeleton illuminated by the flaming firebolt and rushes across the room, then dashes to meet it as it climbs from the decrepit bed. He slashes with his short sword, shattering the skeleton to dust. Skeleton E moves to Fodinas, attacks with short sword, rolls 6 for a miss. The injured skeleton in the rear of the room rushes Fodinas, but slams his blade into the dirt next to Fodinas' feet. Enicel moves behind Theophania, casts Gus, focusing on Skeleton E. Skeleton E's strength saving throw, DC 15, is 8. Enicel moves through the falling skeletons to take up a position behind Theophania and whispers a few words while mimicking wind with her hands, sending the skeleton next to Fodinas flying backwards against the cave wall. Peace moves into melee with Skeleton D and makes 2 claw attacks, rolls a 12 versus AC 13 for a miss, and rolls 12 versus AC 13 for a miss. Peace rushes the skeleton on Umgurn's flank and slashes twice with her claws, but misses as the undead ducks and dodges the feline cuts. Case attacks Skeleton A with spear, attacks Skeleton D with flying longsword, rolls 14 versus AC 13 for 12 piercing damage, rolls 11 versus AC 13 for a miss. Case's spear returns to his hand and he thrusts it into the skeleton in front of him, shattering its skull. He flicks his free hand and nods to bring a dancing longsword slash down on the skeleton behind Umgurn, but the blade misses its shoulder as the creature ducks and bobs. Umgurn attacks Skeleton D twice with scimitar, rolls 6 versus AC 13 for a miss, and rolls 23 versus AC 13 for a hit for 6 slashing damage. Umgurn dodges the slash of the skeleton behind him and counters with a swipe of his scimitar and a backslash of the back end. The second swing cuts the skeleton across the ribs and shatters its chest plate. Skeleton D attempts to flee. Peace and Umgurn have attacks of opportunity. Roll 9 versus AC 13 for a miss, and 9 versus AC 13 for a miss. The undead skeleton, its chest shatters, recoils from Umgurn and turns to flee. Umgurn and Peace take swipes at the foul creature but miss. Malage attacks Skeleton D with Firebolt. Rolls 7 versus AC 13 for a miss. Malage sees the damaged skeleton trying to retreat and launches a firebolt at it, but the flaming mote explodes on the wall beyond it. Theophania attacks Skeleton E with a longbow, rolls 18 for 5 piercing damage. Seeing the skeleton hurled against the wall by Enicel's gust of wind, Theophania launches another arrow, slamming it into the undead's other shoulder. Fodinas attacks Skeleton E with short sword, attacks Skeleton D with short sword, rolls 13 versus AC 13 for 10 piercing damage, and rolls 19 versus AC 13 for 7 piercing damage. Fodinas brandishes his short swords and rushes the skeleton Enicel pushed away, shattering its ribs and spine, then rushes the last skeleton and takes off its head. As the last skeleton falls, the party studies the room in more detail with a bit of light and their innate dark sense. The party make investigation checks. Roll 8, 2, 20, 18, 7, 2, and 4. Despite 2 lamps and the ability to peruse the darkness easily, the room is quite dusty, and the skeletons exploding into fragments stirred it up quite a bit. Not much is visible or easy to discern for most of the party. Case and Malage, however, feel their way around the 3 beds from which half the skeletons emerged and find the series of broken, shattered cabinets opposite them. Upon close inspection, 5 of the cabinets are rotted nearly to dust, and their contents sit as a rotted pile of debris on the floor. Strangely, one of the cabinets seems not that old and quite sturdy, as if it somehow avoided the test of time. Case grabs one of the handles to open the door and feels a sticky wet mass rather than a metal handle. As he tries to pull back, his paw is somewhat stuck. Malage ignites a ball of flame in his hand, and they both see the flames flicker and reflect in 2 enormous eyes looking out from the cabinet. Mimic B attacks Case with Blight, grappled advantage, rolls 11 for a miss. The cabinet's handle morphs into a large purple tongue, and the door splits into a wall of sharp teeth under the looming eyes. The beast tries to chomp down on Case's entrapped arm, but finds its own tongue instead as Case resists with his brute strength. Mimic A attacks Malage with Pseudopod, advantage, surprise, rolls 10 for a miss. The other half of the cabinet suddenly lashes out with another purple tongue at Malage, slithering towards his free hand. Malage jumps back as the tongue thwaps the other cabinet, missing Malage by a hair's breadth. Mimic A and Mimic B are added to initiative. Umgurn casts Searing Smite and attacks Mimic B with Scimitar. Rolls 12 versus AC 12 for a hit for 10 slashing damage. Mimic is on fire. Umgurn sees the eyes and tongues in Malaysia's flame and ignites his own scimitar with a holy prayer and slashes into the beast, cutting deeply into the surface. As Umgurn tries to pull back the blade, he finds it stuck in the creature's flesh. Malaysia uses Burning Hands, rolls 14 fire damage. Mimic's dex saving throws are 14 and 18, 2 saves, 7 fire damage. Cabinet ignites and burns for 2 rounds. Malaysia places his thumbs together, and a line of fire erupts across the mimics, which warp their shape to dodge the flames, but are still singed. The rickety cabinet behind them ignites, creating a bonfire of flame. Eophania uses 2 charges of her longbow to cast Hail of Thorns, attacks Mimic A with longbow. Rolls 12 versus AC 12 for a hit for 9 piercing damage. Mimics A and B, Case and Umgurn make dex saving throws of 4, 9, 18, and 16. 2 fails and 2 saves. The mimics take 2 piercing damage each. Theophania notches an arrow in her longbow and squeezes the grip 3 times, causing the arrow to light up with small green thorns. She fires at the closest creature, striking it at the side. A barrage of thorns erupts from the arrow and tears into the creature's flesh and the creature next to it. Umgurn and Case deftly dodge the thorns. Fodinus moves into melee with Mimic A, attacks with 2 short swords, sneak attack. Rolls 12 versus AC 12 for 9 piercing damage plus 6 sneak attack damage. Rolls 24 versus AC 12 for 5 piercing damage. Fodinus charges up to the closest creature next to Malaysia and swings, not hearing Umgurn shouting no. His first swipe digs deep into its flesh, and the second slash solidly connects with the beast. Fodinus tries to pull back his weapons, but he finds they are stuck in the beast. Inicel casts Moonbeam over at Mimic A and B. Inicel sees Case stuck to one of the beast, Umgurn and Fodinus' weapons buried in their flesh, and a bonfire burning behind them. She murmurs a few words while holding her staff and making a circle with her free hand. A bright beam of moonlight shines down from the cave ceiling and engulfs the 2 creatures. Peace casts Sacred Flame on Mimic A. Mimic A dex saving throw of 3 fails, takes 6 radiant damage. Peace, seeing Inicel's response, follows with a radiance blast of flame on the creature engaged with Fodinus and Malaysia, searing its flesh. Case attacks Mimic B with spear, one-handed, rolls 20 versus AC 12 for 12 piercing damage. Case, frightened by the creature's grasp on his paw, instinctively stabs with his spear, deeply piercing the creature. However, his spear now appears to be stuck in its flesh as well. Mimic B makes Con saving throw, DC 13, Searing Smite. Con saving throw, DC 14, Moonbeam, disadvantage, and attacks Case with a bite. Rolls 5 Con saving throw, fails, takes 3 fire damage, still on fire. Rolls 15 Con saving throw, takes 5 radiant damage. Rolls 25 crit for 6 piercing damage and 11 acid damage. The creature's flesh, on fire from Umgurn's blade, crackles and burns as the flames spread. Unable to move from the surrounding foes and the bonfire, it still dodges away from the silvery beam of Inicel with spots of glowing heat forming on its flesh. With Case adhered to its tongue, the beast chomps on his arm with tremendous force and burning acid saliva. Mimic A makes a Con saving throw, DC 14, Moonbeam, disadvantage, attacks Malaysia with Pseudopod. Rolls 8 Con saving throw, takes 12 radiant damage, reverts to object form. Rolls 21 versus AC 17 for a hit for 10 bludgeoning damage. The second creature takes the full brunt of the moonlight from Inicel, its flesh searing as it reverts to a seemingly harmless although damaged chest. Fodinus' weapons are dislodged from the beast and he steps back. A tongue of purplish flesh erupts from the chest and smacks Malaysia in the side, sticking hard to the genasi. Umgurn casts Toll the Dead, rolls 9 necrotic damage. Mimic B rolls 12 wisdom saving throw, fails. Umgurn murmurs mystical words and folds his hands in and out as a long gong of bell rings out, and the creature next to him recoils from the black necrotic energy crumbling its flesh. Malaysia casts Burning Hands at Mimic A and B, rolls 11 fire damage. Dex saving throws are 18 and 8. Mimic A takes 6 fire damage and Mimic B takes 11 fire damage. Horrified by the adhesive tongue pulling him and seeing the other beast chomp down on Case's arm, Malaysia reconnects his thumbs and launches another line of fire. As the flames strike the creatures, they howl loudly, vibrate momentarily, and then collapse into piles of purplish green ooze. Case is released and Umgurn's blades pull free and the tongue falls away from Malaysia. The party receives 200 experience points each. As the party's fighting rush subsides, Malaysia begins collecting fragments of wood, cloth, and other items that will burn, and piles them in the old fire pit in the corner, which has a flume going out of the top of the cave, which he noticed when the cabinets were burning. He ignites them with a flame from his hand, and the cavern is filled with light. The party makes a thorough search of the beds and cabinets, as well as the broken pottery and stoneware near the entrance. There is nothing of value, and everything is ancient except for a small pile of dust, which looks very different from the cave stone around it. The short swords of the skeletons look recently made, but of poor quality. Malaysia makes an Arcana check and an Intelligence check. Rolls 17 and 20.
This dust. I think it was a magical scroll, but I have no idea what the spell was. It simply has a residue of magic on it. And these swords are relatively new.
Case and Fodinus move the cabinet fragments to the fire once they are inspected and pile them up to be burned. Inicel and Theophania examine the skeleton remains. Theophania makes a medicine check, rolls 20.
These are kobold skeletons, and based on the color and condition, do not appear to have been made that long ago. There is a necromancer at work in this place.
She begins carrying the bones with Inicel to the fire and tossing them in, along with all of the weapons. Inicel adds flowers, herbs, and a few shiny stones.
Or someone may have used that scroll to make them. And they could be any sort of wizard, actually. If it wasn't the scroll to animate 6 corpses, they would have needed to be a powerful necromancer to have so many.
Malaysia looks nervously at the group.
For the time being, I suggest we guard this entrance and take a long rest. Agreed.
The party nods. Malaysia casts Alarm as a ritual twice. Malaysia adds alarms to the hole they climb down and to the hole leading down further, and the party rests in the back of the room, farthest from the hole. They set a watch and rotate in shifts to sleep. Inicel and Malaysia reconsider their spells to prepare considering what may lie ahead and choose a bit more combat and healing. The rest is quiet and sound. Everyone eats some rations as they prepare for what to do next. The party completes a long rest.
We saw nothing above to indicate kobold here recently, but the airship attack on our way to Philo was led by kobolds.
Fodinus chews on a bit of meat.
The Phila airship theory is plausible, but something would have killed them and made them skeletons, and I would guess something not friendly with the kobolds, and not an agent of Sentinelfis.
Malaysia eats some bites of cheese and bread.
The familiars that flew up as far as they could didn't see anything to speak of, but there is so much more of that tree. Something more dangerous, or perhaps of value, could be further up.
Theophania folds her arms across her chest and looks up.
But these kobold skeletons were here on the way down.
Inicel points to the hole.
There are 2 choices. It is a distraction, or it is a defense. If we assume that someone used a very powerful scroll to animate these dead, we must consider it a defense.
Peace pours tea for Case.
Those cabinets that attacked are what are known as mimics. I have heard of them, but if someone took the time to learn to control them and place them here, that would be a considerable effort for a distraction.
Umgurn examines the blade of his scimitar carefully.
Then it seems obvious. There is something below us that someone wants to protect a great deal.
Case sips his tea and eats another bite of meat.
But this cavern is ancient. It was not recently dug, so whoever placed these defenses here must be looking for something ancient?
Theophania swipes at a bit of dirt and cobwebs from the ceiling of the cavern that are affecting her hair.
And hidden for a long time, due to the decimation by Sentinelfis.
Malaysia stands and walks towards the hole. The rest of the party begins packing their things, and within a few minutes, everyone is looking down below.
All of the stone for the city above had to come from this mine. But what else did they find?
Peace looks over the edge.
Let's find out.
Fodinus begins securing several pitons in the wall of the cavern, while Case ties links of rope together to increase the length to about twice the normal size. Once the pitons are secured and the rope is looped in, Fodinus begins climbing down. Every 2 arm spans or so, he checks the integrity of the ladder that is clearly visible. The wood still appears ancient and the bindings mere threads. He reaches out with his foot and taps the ladder. Instead of turning into dust and collapsing, it seems incredibly strong. Fodinus looks up at Malaysia, smiles, and leaps off the rope onto the ladder. It holds his weight easily. Fodinus looks up into the darkness above and sees Inicel leaning out with her glowing scimitar.
Inicel, Check those ladders up there.
Inesel turns her head far to the right, then back to the left, and walks over to the lower ladder. She gives it a tug and finds it very strong. Smiling back at the group, she climbs up to the halfway plank, steps onto it, and bounces up and down a few times. It seems strong as well. She tries the first ladder again. It is surprisingly strong. She returns to the group and calls down to Fodinas.
They are very strong. Must be some sort of magic at work on them. Charm to be stronger or illusion to look old. Either way, don't assume that's true for all of them. Could be a trap.
Fodinas nods far below and continues the descent. Unlike the first hole, which was nearly 12 arm spans down, this ladder ends on stone after only 8 arm spans or so. There is another wooden plank with a ladder secured to it going down further, and the stone tunnel opens to the west, just as with the bunkhouse above. To the east, there are the beginnings of a tunnel, but it ends after less than an arm span in a pile of stone, sand, dirt, and debris.
Looks like a collapse to the east. Opens to the west.
Fodinas moves partially into the western entrance and waits for the party. After a few minutes, everyone has scampered down the rope or the ladder. The party make investigation and perception checks. Roll 5, 7, 14, 2, 8, 11, and 16, and roll 9, 11, 16, 7, 21, 24, and 23. Theophania and Inesel notice that the cavern ahead of them is cut from the same stone as the bunk room, but is much narrower. Peace stoops down to touch the floor, runs their hands along the wall, and looks up, seeing tool marks in the main cavern as if blocks of stone were cut out piece by piece. There are holes in the ceiling which appear more natural with less tool marks. Inesel detects a slight gamey smell from the cave beneath the mustiness, but cannot place it. Malaysia, Theophania, and Peace also detect the smell, but the familiarity is more clear.
This cave was used to cut the stones for the foundations above, but these holes in the ceiling were natural formations, and if we are not mistaken, something has laid eggs somewhere in this cave recently.
Peace looks at the group concerned. Theophania and Malaysia nod in agreement.
Theophania, boost me up into one of these holes. Case, you boost Peace into the other.
Peace nods and approaches Case, but Theophania pauses.
But we all agree there is something living here and breeding.
Theophania folds her arms across her chest.
Yes, but it's probably just some tiny cave beasts.
Malaysia points to the nearest hole, his feet, and makes a boost me up motion.
It is best that we proceed with caution in this tunnel system at all times, including making sure we are not ambushed. Euphania, Case, boost them up.
Umgern draws his scimitar, spins it in his hands, and points it towards the first hole. Fodinas draws short swords and points them at the second hole. Inesel casts Mold Earth. Inesel speaks a few words, and the ground beneath the party's feet seems to flatten and smooth a bit, giving them more stable footing. She nods, and Theophania and Case boost Malaysia and Peace. Both look into the darkness with their natural senses and scan the small cavern. Malaysia grabs the side and pulls himself in and vanishes. Peace likewise scrambles into the recess and is gone. The remainder stand tense. As the seconds tick by, the apprehension grows with no noise coming from either space. Malaysia's head suddenly appears smiling. He drops into Theophania's arms and settles to the ground.
There was something there before. Lots of tool marks and excavation scars around 4 or 5 large holes. Maybe gems or ore? Couldn't tell.
He brushes the dust from his coat. Peace appears seconds later and lands on the cave floor without assistance. They open their paws, and Inesel's scimitar lights up over their hands. Several tiny slivers of gemstone sparkle against their fur. Malaysia makes a nature check, rolls 23.
Sapphire, emerald, ruby? Hard to be sure, but certainly valuable. Well, not those, but whatever they pull out of these holes.
Peace nods and hands the fragments to Inesel, who drops them in a piece of cloth, ties them into a bundle, and drops them in her bag.
Let's move on.
Umgern motions with his scimitar. The party make stealth checks versus DC 12. Roll 24, 9, 21, 24, 5, 13, and 15. The party moves along the tooled stone cavern and quickly finds 2 more ceiling tunnels to the left. They take the same positions, and Inesel again stabilizes the ground. Malaysia climbs up, as does Peace, and both search while the party waits in silence, except for Umgern's slight clanking of his splint mail. After several minutes, the pair drop down as before and report the same holes with tooling, but nothing more. As they regroup and move slightly further, another 2 holes appear on the right. At the base of each hole, there is a solid, odd-shaped piece of stone. Malaysia and Peace take their boosts and scramble into the darkness. Peace makes their way through the darkness of the short recess and finds the end with a small bowl cut into the stone in which sit 4 small, glistening eggs with a leathery covering. Peace pulls their black cloak from their bag, wraps the eggs in it carefully, and places them in their bag. They move back towards the entrance. Malaysia climbs through the darkness of the little cave, which makes a sharp downward turn. At the bottom lay 3 glistening eggs that looked like they were made of leather. Malaysia pulls his chest of preserving from his bag of holding and adds the eggs to it and replaces it. He moves back towards the entrance. While the two are gone, Umgurn's armor continues to make slight clinks and clanks in the dark silence of the cavern. A sound like wet chains dragging across stone seems to emanate from the floor of the cavern in front of Theophania and Case. Inacel hears a similar noise behind the party further back in the cavern. She pulls her scimitar and sheds bright light in the cavern, filling it all the way to the end. In addition to the 2 stones at the mouth of the holes that Peace and Malaysia are in, a 3rd stone sits at the opening of another, and a final stone sits at the end of the cavern.
Inacel makes a perception check. Rolls 7, critical 1.
Despite the bright light, the stones still appear typical, though their placement is odd. She points to the 4 stones as the party looks on. They all look at the stones in turn and shrug their shoulders. Theophania turns to the stone in front of her and pokes it with her short sword. The side of the stone suddenly splits away from the rest to reveal 4 spiky tentacles surrounding a sharp beak. Thank you for visiting Engedrian. Don't forget to find us on Facebook, X, formerly Twitter, Instagram, TikTok, and YouTube for additional content, battle maps, and background details. We hope you're enjoying our adventure. We can't wait to hear what happens next.